that was heartbreaking. These two innocent girls were viciously murdered.
A brutal killing.
Both victims were killed by asphyxiation, cord wrapped around their throats.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
Everything was a possibility. Stalkers, someone they met brought home.
You want to try to narrow in who's the last person in that apartment.
When you find out that they have some aggressive tendencies, that makes them even more of a suspect.
The truth will be revealed.
There was something psychologically wrong with him. Dealing with people like that, anything's liable to happen.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. New York, a place where anything can happen and where anyone can become someone.
It's a big city with plenty of opportunities.
This was the start. If you can't make it in New York, you can't make it anywhere.
But behind the glamour lies darkness.
West Harlem in 1992.
It was during the holiday season coming up, December 19th, close to Christmas, and the call came into the homicide squad.
There was a complaint from the woman who lived in the apartment below about the water coming from the apartment above. The super went up to investigate, knocked on the door, no answer.
The apartment belongs to 20-year-old Nikki Silas and 19-year-old Brittany Rojas.
After not getting any answer, he decided to go from the roof down to the fire escape. And when he looked into the apartment, he seen who he knew as Nikki laying in the bed. He thought she was asleep, so he was banging on the window. Banging hard and got no response, so he forced the window open. And he went to touch her to wake her up and realized she wasn't gonna wake up. She was dead. And he went towards the front where the water leak was coming from, and he found Brittany's body floating in the tub.
He picked up the phone and called the police.
Detectives Daryl Hayes and Rudy Hall of Manhattan North Homicide are assigned to the case. Inside the apartment, they find a grisly scene.
As you enter the apartment door from the hallway, to the left is a bathroom. You can see that there was a struggle. You see the sink dislodged and on the floor. And then you see Brittany Rojas in the tub. She had her cord wrapped around her neck. We weren't sure at that time if that was the cause of her death. Was it that she was strangled to death, or did she drown? As you walk to the bedroom where Nikki Silas is on the bed, you can see that she was disrobed and she was dead. You couldn't tell at that time if there was a rape. You just seen her laying there like she was asleep. And same thing, Nikki had a ligature cord around her throat.
That is strange when you find two bodies in one location. But this whole case was strange. I think they were good girls. They didn't deserve to die. By no means.
I think in any homicide case, a team of detectives see the side of the victim's family that's suffering for the loss of their child. And it's our job to put closure to it.
To solve the murder, detectives must piece together the last 24 hours of the victims' lives.
The ME gives you a time of death as close as they can, based on the temperature of the body, based on post-mortem. But at the time, during the initial crime scene, we didn't know that. We tried to get noise complaints if anybody heard anything. Tried a timeline of when this water leak started coming into the apartment. We found on the counter there was a receipt. On the receipt, it named a particular store in the neighborhood a couple of blocks away.
The receipt is time-stamped, December 19th, 1:15 a.m.
A team of detectives went there to talk to the night clerk that remember a female coming in to purchase some groceries about that time. So we knew that they were alive from the point of the receipt going forward.
The information gathered allows them to place time of death between 1:30 and 3 a.m.
The medical examiner told us that both victims were killed by asphyxiation. The assumption was that Brittany was attacked sexually, but we just didn't have the concrete evidence. She was submerged in water, so if there was any DNA that was available, it was contaminated.
Detectives do find DNA evidence on Nikki Silas's body.
The ME couldn't say for sure that that DNA would be from the victim having sex with the murderer, or is it that she had sex with her boyfriend and he went off to go to work and then somebody came in and attacked her.
They send the sample from Nikki to the lab and continue to process the scene.
The apartment to me looked like it was in disarray. You could see that somebody ransacked the place. Maybe they came in and the burglar was already in the apartment.
But it wasn't a straight out robbery. The way the bodies were found, if it's a robbery, you don't hang around to rape anybody. You want to get your loot and get out.
They showed no signs of forced entry at the front door. So the question comes, okay, then they either had access to the apartment or were allowed in by one or two or both people living in the apartment.
Police then discover a handwritten note at the foot of Nikki's bed.
It said, train directions to and from Queens to Manhattan, and getting off at the exit closer to their house. We were determining if somebody was visiting the apartment that never been there before, that they needed directions. We didn't know if that was something old or new. You couldn't put a timeline. It didn't have a date. How significant at that time, we couldn't determine.
In most instances, a murderer doesn't just kill random people. There's usually a connection. And if there's more than one dead body at a scene, usually the police can determine whether or not the second person was just an accident, essentially, in the wrong place at the wrong time.
With no way to know which one was targeted, detectives start to trace both girls' contacts.
In most homicide cases, we always request the phone logs. You want to try to narrow in who's the last person that somebody in that apartment spoke to. Then you want to talk to that person or persons and say, well, did they indicate they were having problems with anybody? Normally, you can get them back in a short period of time. But keep in mind, this is December 19th. It's close to the holiday season. And at that particular time, they had an active kidnapping homicide case going on. So it delayed the phone records coming back on a timely fashion.
They now have the heartbreaking task of contacting the families.
It's hard to make notifications to a family member saying that somebody's deceased or passed away. You want to make sure that there's other family members and a support mechanism there that could help, because you don't know how they're going to react to it.
I was just going to bed and the doorbell rang. There were 2 policemen there. And they said there's been an accident in New York. And at the time, I couldn't click it. I just couldn't think, well, Nikki doesn't drive, so it couldn't have been a car accident. And then when they came in and they told us, It was like somebody pulled the rug out from under me. And my husband just fell apart.
Detectives learned Nikki was a college student from Massachusetts, and Brittany was from Queens.
Brittany moved in with Nikki after Thanksgiving. Her mother still lived in Brazil. I just think she was all alone as far as having a parent around.
The family had mentioned that Nikki was into dancing and doing videos, and it was determined that she did a video with one of the Caribbean artists named Shaba Ranks.
They had ambitions of being in the show business world, the dancing and all the glitter that goes along with that.
I think that was her goal, to make contacts. If she got in the video, maybe she would have a chance to do some acting. She had been home that Thanksgiving, and she told me that she couldn't pay the rent anymore. So her plan was to finish college there for the semester and come home. She came home on the 22nd, but not the way I expected. She came home in a casket.
Detectives also interview Nikki's brother Damon about his last contact with her.
About 9 p.m., Nikki's on the phone with her brother who called her to see what's going on, and she's telling him that she's got company, they're playing cards. No names were given. Now we gotta find who that person or persons are.
Nikki's family does have an idea of who it could be.
When the police told me she had been murdered, both Damon and I said, it's gotta be Cooley.
Cooley was Nikki's boyfriend.
Nikki telling her mother that Cooley was a vicious person that attacked her and was abusive to her.
I said, I didn't bring you into this world to be abused. I said, you need to get away from that. But she wasn't gonna leave New York as far as Cooley was concerned.
Usually the boyfriend or the husband is the first person you look at as being a suspect. And when you find out that they have some aggressive tendencies insofar as domestic violence, that makes them even more of a suspect.
A man named Cooley has quickly become a person of interest in the double homicide of Brittany Rojas and Nikki Silas.
He had a previous record for domestic violence. He's the prime person you want to find first. We found out that this person worked at the Apollo Theater in Harlem. When he's brought in, initially, we challenged him with the things we found out. He was forthcoming, saying, yes, we had relationship problems. We were arguing all the time, but he denied ever putting his hands on her. He denied ever threatening her. But yet, he did say that he didn't want her to be around people, socializing with people, and felt that with her being in the video business and meeting celebrities, he might lose her to somebody else that was more successful. You say to yourself, you know, hey, he has an anger issue, but is it enough to say that he would be willing to commit this type of murder?
They need to know where he was between 1 and 3 a.m.
Cooley had an alibi that had to be checked and verified. It was sketchy. It wasn't enough to say he couldn't have made this time frame of when we believe the homicide took place.
Detectives try another tech to link him to the crime.
When we said, well, we want DNA, he didn't hesitate. But it could be, hey, that's my girlfriend, of course we had sex, so you can have my DNA, I didn't do anything wrong.
Despite his shaky alibi and a potential explanation for the presence of his DNA, it's still not enough to physically place him at the scene.
We went back to the neighborhood and we discovered someone who noticed something interesting in the apartment building or in the area. Daniel Ramirez was the assistant super. He would have known who belonged in the building and who didn't. He's very observant.
He happened to be there that particular day, a little later than 1 in the morning.
Ramirez reports that he sees these two African Americans leaving the building. One looks very upset. He's so agitated to the point that he throws up, leaving the building.
The other gentleman was carrying what he believed to be either a duffel bag or a laundry bag with a safe that was protruding out of this bag. Daniel Ramirez helped the sketch be composed of what he saw of these individuals going down the stairs and out the building. Cooley had to stand in a lineup, which he consented to. And Mr. Ramirez observed the lineup with Cooley in it, and he did not identify Cooley in the lineup as a person or persons of the two people going out of the building during the time that we believe the homicide occurred. After the interview, the results came in that it wasn't his DNA. That proved to us at that time that he wasn't what caused her death.
With Cooley ruled out, detectives revisit the crime scene evidence. They examine letters addressed to Brittany Rojas.
We found out that Brittany was in communication with an inmate that was being held at Rikers Island, knowing that he was incarcerated at the time. And that proved that he couldn't have done it. But maybe he says, you know what, I know that they felt threatened or they were having some personal issues in their life that might have been the reason that they were killed. So we had to go interview this person and have a conversation to see if he might have been aware of any reason anybody would have been after attacking Brittany or maybe her roommate, Nikki Salas. He said he loved her. He claims he didn't know that she was having any problems with anybody that he might have been aware of. But during the interview, it was mentioned that one of the locations that Brittany and Nikki worked was in a peep show called Show World.
It's a bombshell for detectives, and the Times Square location is well known to police.
When the Navy comes in with the big ships, the sailors come in, the first thing they do is they go to Show World, put their money in, they want to see dancers on stage, take their clothes off. And that's where a lot of these celebrity dance artists and stuff would go to pick girls that sit in on a video shoot and perform and dance.
When investigators discovered that these two girls were more than students, that they were working at this well-established club, for them it opened up a whole host of other potential suspects. Establishments like this attract a certain criminal element.
So my initial thought was whatever happened to them came from Show World.
They learn it was here where Brittany and Nikki first met and decided to become roommates.
Some people believe it's a lot of seedy females that work there, but 90% of the females that do work there are school kids. You know, going to school, trying to support their education. They got a percentage of what slots money came in, and that's how they made their money. It pays well. On an average night, they can make $400 or $500.
But while Nikki and Brittany lived on the straight and narrow, many of the customers did not.
You have people that come in there that have drug abuse. You have people that come in there that are sex crime perpetrators.
Everything was a possibility. Stalkers, someone they met.
The visitors, the men who are there, can see who's making the money. And it's not very difficult to imagine a scenario where the patrons of a strip club will follow home a dancer and attempt to rob them.
When you're dealing with people like that, anything's liable to happen.
Detectives question the girls' co-workers.
Brittany had a regular person who she used to date from the show world. An admirer, an older person.
He was giving her a lot of attention and cash. The term was sugar daddy.
Brittany was known to spend time with him outside the club.
One of the theories was that because he knew where she lived, that maybe he was there on that particular night and something went wrong. Maybe he says, hey, you can't be around nobody else. You're gonna do what I say. I'm giving you money.
And she refused. He got angry, and he killed her.
And if Nikki was a witness, it might be you're forced to make that decision to take her out because she know who you are.
Rape is a very serious offense. There's a high incentive for you to make sure that nobody in that apartment is left to tell the police what you've done.
You want to find this person. You want to know who he is. What was he about?
The discovery that a sugar daddy dated murder victim Brittany Rojas has detectives staking out a Times Square nightclub.
He comes there frequently enough that we felt comfortable to pick him up whenever he showed up. You want to talk to him, try to find out where he was during the night of this particular case. What was his interest in her? Was it solely a sex relation, or was it just, hey, you felt real bad, she's struggling, and you have money, and you just wanted to give her money for her to spend time with you? So the first thing you're looking for is any facial marks, scratches, any indication that they look like they've been in a fight, because it was a severe fight in there. You know, she put up a struggle. He had no injuries, he didn't show signs. He was really upset that she was dead.
When someone's being extremely cooperative with police, it can either be taken in a number of ways. It can be a flag that that person is trying to get their attention away from somebody else. Or it could be that they sincerely want to work with the police to try to get something solved.
You ask him a question, he answered it as best he could. I'm not gonna say it was a love relationship, but he really liked her. He felt real bad and said, if there's anything that I could do to help solve this, I'd be willing to. And the alibi that he gave was substantial enough to prove that he wasn't a part of the crime. He couldn't have made it to that location and did what he had to do and get back. His DNA didn't match Nikki's, and he was ruled out.
It was heartbreaking because these two innocent girls were viciously murdered, and there wasn't much to go on as far as clues or evidence.
Every time we thought we had something, they were ruled out. Every time we thought we had some valuable information, it turned out to be no good. So you're trying to put the time pieces together, and there was no other fingerprints in there that we can come across. So the case is what we call stale. You're back to ground zero.
For Nikki's already grieving family, what the case uncovers only causes more pain.
When they told me that she was working at Show World, I was shocked. I felt awful. I wished she had called me and asked me for some money. But the media made a circus out of it. Every weekend, there would be something on the front page. And they were always negative, as if Nikki, because she was in Show World, that's why she was murdered. That was all hurtful. But that was not what made Nikki Show World. It just wasn't. She was a good soul.
After 2 weeks of waiting, detectives finally received Nikki and Brittany's phone records.
We noticed that a phone call was made from the apartment to a number listed in Queens around the time the murders occurred. And we were very curious about what that phone call was about and the substance of it.
And keep in mind, we had the directions that was given to how to get to Nikki and Brittany's apartment from Queens. I want to go out and invade people's privacy, find out what they don't want people to know, and get the results, and that's what I do.
So we head off to the address where the phone is located. We knock on the door, the female answers, and we announce who we are and why we were there. We had a phone call being made to that apartment. She said she didn't remember, but she said, well, there was a voice message left on the voicemail from somebody that was looking for my boyfriend, Tommy, who's not here right now. And this person sounded very agitated and excited. And we asked if we could listen to the voice message. And she told us she no longer had the phone or the tape. Gave us a story about having an argument with her boyfriend, and she throwing the phone at him. The phone broke, and it was in the garbage.
Or is the phone being thrown away because you know what the end result was and you was trying to get rid of the evidence?
So we had the emergency service search the dumpster. We found the phone, but with no tape.
This call may be the only link to the killer, and only one person can tell detectives what was said.
She didn't know this person, but her boyfriend wouldn't know. Later, we got a phone call from the boyfriend, Tommy. We had listened to the message, and he identified the person on the other end as a friend of his by the name of Antoine Adterbury, and he lived in an address in Queens.
Antoine was calling him to complain that the person he was with was bugging out, attacking his females in this apartment, and he didn't want no parts of it, and he was out of there. So now you got somebody that can say, we're in that apartment on the day of the incident. Two girls are dead, and the only one that can speak on anything is Antoine Adterbury. But is he a part of it?
Detectives dig into the background of a potential witness to the brutal murders of Nikki and Brittany.
Once we had the name Antoine Atterbury, we could do a criminal check. Nothing stuck out to say he was a wanted person or a known felon that got locked up numerous times. We found out that he had gotten a job at one of the premier department stores in Queens, that his mother was an upper-level manager there. So his life was positive. And myself and Detective Hall, now that we got where Antoine lives, we take a ride out to Queens. He wasn't shocked to me, you know, when we came in. He didn't look like, you know, somebody that has something to hide. He treated us like gentlemen.
I'm a good interviewer, and I'm a good judge of character. It's something that you develop over the years. We're talking to different people. You can usually tell when someone's hiding something.
Detectives ask Antoine about the murders.
He first denied knowing that they were killed. He said he didn't hear it or see it on the news.
Then, they confront him with the phone call.
He was trying to play it down. He just wouldn't give up too much information. It was like pulling teeth with him. You know, he'd give you what you want to hear at times, and that was true.
He didn't come out readily and make admissions on his own.
As the questioning continues, Detective Hayes spots something interesting.
On the left of the living room floor is a silhouette of a safe. That safe that we see is what Ramirez sees in a duffel bag or a laundry bag of one of them leaving the building. That might be the safe that we're talking about. I cannot say how shocking it was that it would be in visible sight.
In a murder investigation, there's really no such thing as coincidence. It's the result of a lot of legwork, a lot of door knocking, interviewing suspects. It's something that happens because you make your own luck.
We asked him about the safe. He said, it's not mine. That's my roommate's. He brought that stuff here. And we went around and around until he finally admitted that he did make the phone call.
That says that Antoine Adterbury is at that apartment. So we put him in the car to go back to the 2-4 precinct. He started realizing that he's in trouble and that I might as well just tell the truth.
Antoine tells detectives his roommate, Kevin Latson, met Brittany in Queens a few weeks earlier.
He was coming out of getting a haircut, ran into her in front of the barbershop and struck up a conversation. They exchanged phone numbers. Some weeks to a month later, he bumps into her again and said, well, I thought you was gonna call me. She said, look, yeah, we can go out, but I got a roommate now. He said, oh, that's strange. I got a guy living with me too. Maybe we could do a double date. Basically, they set up this day to go out, December 18th.
Brittany had given Kevin written directions for the train.
Those were the directions that we found to how to get to Nikki and Brittany's apartment from his house in Queens.
Antoine says that he and Kevin got to the girls' apartment around 8 p.m. They spent several hours playing cards. Then, Antoine claims, late in the evening, he left the apartment with Nikki.
And when they came back, they found Brittany's body, and Kevin was all agitated.
He tells us that Kevin snatches Nikki, and that's when Antoine starts making the call. And when he makes that call and he leaves that voice message, he says he runs out the apartment, and he made it clear, I left that apartment, I didn't leave with anything, I ran out there with nothing. He don't know exactly what time Kevin came down, but he was already out before Kevin. But the question always is, besides calling your friend, why didn't you call the police?
People put themselves into a crime scene and realize they have to get themselves out with minimal guilt.
So we don't know. Did they both do it?
The only way to verify Antoine's story is to find the other man who was there that night.
We went back to Queens looking for his roommate, Kevin Latson. We found him on the street heading toward the apartment. And we scooped him up and brought him back to 24th Precinct. We walked him by Antoine to make sure that they both know that they were both there.
Officers will often place someone against the other person. Or what they'll do is they'll go talk to one person and say, did you know this person mentioned this about you? It may not always be true, but it's a way to try to find out who the true culprits are.
Kevin was upset because he thought Antoine was stalking. He was more upset about that than anything else.
There's a huge amount of contempt on the streets for rats. If you talk to the police, or you get called out as being a rat, even if you're not one, your life can be in danger.
Detectives need to break Kevin's silence and discover who really killed Nikki and Brittany.
He didn't show any signs of remorse. He didn't show any signs like he didn't care. He just was one of those like, all right, if y'all ain't got no evidence, I'm out of here. He was cold.
We was telling him, you know, you're gonna go down. This is your opportunity to come clean because your buddies are giving it all up and he's blaming you. He never broke them. Kept denying. Where in Adterbury was very open, remorseful. Kevin was just the opposite, which made me believe Antoine more than I did Kevin.
Investigators have one more card to play in Daniel Ramirez. The witness, who can possibly place both of them at the scene.
It was a positive hit on both of them. Daniel Ramirez says that both Kevin Latson and Antoine Adterbury were the two people he saw leaving the building. Adterbury with nothing in his hands and throwing up, looking distressed. And Kevin with the duffel bag with the safe, you could say, wow, that's what we were waiting for. It gave probable cause that we know that both of them were involved at the time of the homicide.
This confirms Kevin was outside the building, but it's still not enough to prove which of them did it. They now need something that puts him inside the girl's home.
Antoine told us that Kevin Latson took a lot of music CDs that the girls had in the apartment, jewelry, and one of the biggest things was the coat that Kevin gave this girl, saying he bought it for her for Christmas. Well, once we knew the coat came from the girlfriend, we had her statement saying that she received this coat from him. He was presented with that, but he couldn't deny it because he knows he gave it to her. You would have thought Kevin would have rolled over and said, wait, I didn't do this by myself. I did Nikki, but he did Brittany. And that never surfaced.
The only thing I can surmise is that he didn't want to snitch on his friend. We told him, well, we got DNA there, so you might as well tell us the truth.
Once police have you in their sights, if you, as a suspect, think you're getting away with murder, you're sadly mistaken.
Detectives Daryl Hayes and Rudy Hall close in on key evidence needed to deliver justice for Nikki and Brittany.
When they got the DNA results back, it's what I suspected. DA was a match with Kevin Latson.
He knew then, I think, that he was going to see freedom, that it was done.
Detectives arrest and charge Kevin Latson with double homicide, as well as criminal possession of stolen property.
Antoine pled guilty to burglary. If he had picked up the phone and called the police, I think the DA would have looked at him in a different light.
They now know the details behind the last 24 hours of the young women's lives and how a casual date brought them into the orbit of a heartless killer.
Antoine leaves Queens with Kevin. They get on the train. They decide they're going to the movies and maybe go somewhere to eat. That was the initial plan. But as they get to the station of 94th Street where the girls live, and they come out, it's pouring down rain. So when they get to the apartment, they said, well, you know what? Let's just wait the rain to go past and then we'll go out. So in the meantime, they're socializing, gathering, and it just never stopped. It just kept raining, kept raining. Nikki's on the phone with her brother who called her to see what's going on, and she's telling him that she's got company, they're playing cards. They decide, look, instead of y'all going back in this rain because y'all came through the subway and it's still raining, y'all can stay here tonight. They decide Brittany and Nikki gonna sleep in one room, and Antoine and Kevin will be in another room. It started unraveling when they decided to sleep in separate rooms. So in Kevin's mind, what? We sleep in separate rooms. I don't want to sleep with him, I want to sleep with you, being Brittany. Nikki decides that she's gonna walk her dog, and Antoine Adterbury goes out with her. And Nikki purchased something from a store. While Nikki and Antoine are outside walking the dog, it's apparent that Kevin Latson attacks Brittany in the bathroom. And a struggle ensued, which caused the sink in the bathroom to dismount off the wall, and her being found with a cord in the tub wrapped around her throat.
Nikki and Antoine come back to the apartment, and they find Brittany dead in the bathtub. And Kevin, very agitated, grabs Nikki, pulls her into the bedroom, rapes her, then strangles her.
Antoine decides to pick up the phone and call a friend of his out in Queens and tell him that Kevin is bugging out, he's attacking these girls, and I don't want to be a part of it, and I'm out of here.
They leave the apartment, after taking the safe, some jewelry, and some clothing. And they're seen by the super helper, Daniel Ramirez, downstairs, leaving the building. Kevin Latson was there for sex. I think he killed Brittany because he made sexual advances toward her and she refused. And it angered him, and he strangled her.
In March 1995, Kevin Latson is convicted and given 40 years to life.
Latson, there was something psychologically wrong with him. If it hadn't been this, it'd have been something else.
Antoine Adterbury is sentenced to 7 to 21 years for burglary. But in a twist of fate, it becomes a life sentence.
Antoine ended up dying in prison in 2002. Antoine, I just think it was a person caught wrong place, wrong time.
In an attempt at closure, 20 years later, Karen Silas asks to meet with Kevin Latson.
I wasn't a bit nervous going in. It was like, I'm supposed to do this. I started talking first and, told him that I didn't hate him, but I hated what he did to Nikki, what he did to us, how he changed so many lives, and how it affected so many lives. He said he made a big, stupid mistake. He wished he had never done it. He apologized many times for what he did to us. I truly believed he was remorseful. There was nothing cocky or put on about him. He was real. I came out of that prison like someone had taken a weight off my shoulder.
In this particular case, after it was all over with, I thought to myself, I said, oh, how sad that they had to come to this fate.
Nikki, she'll be young forever. I think about her and think, would she be married? I think about her kids. If she had kids, I miss that that's not going to be. But I still have a lot of blessings. That's what counts. It's not what's missing, it's what you have.
You just don't wake up one morning and commit a crime of this nature. Not this demented and sick and evil.
A brutal killing.
An innocent young girl should not have to worry about being murdered in her own apartment.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
There was this kind of bad blood between them.
He was a registered sex offender. He paints himself as a great guy, but he's lying, he's lying, he's lying.
The truth will be revealed.
He is a walking time bomb. He is just incredibly dangerous.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. In the early morning hours in Arlington, Texas, emergency services respond to a frantic 911 call.
A citizen living in the apartment complex heard glass break. They assumed that was a burglary, so the Arlington police were called.
When our officers showed up, they saw the smoke and the flames in the apartment.
The fire department arrives. They do what they're supposed to do, and that is put out the fire.
Once the flames are extinguished, the true horror of the scene is revealed.
The apartment was destroyed. It was a mess. I went into the bedroom. There was a young woman laying on her back on the bed. And the very first thing I saw was a circular, round puncture in the middle of her chest. It was clear to me that there's a stab wound.
She was burned enough to not be recognizable, but not to the point that it concealed the injuries that we found. She was lying on her back on a bed, and that part of her in contact with the bed was relatively spared from the heat. Right away, we're going to treat it like it's foul play.
The Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office had the responsibility for positive identification, and they were able to do that with dental records.
And that's what led to the discovery that it was Missy Grubauer. She was 19 years old, 2.5 weeks from her 20th birthday.
Arlington police detectives Tommy Lenore and John Stanton are tasked with finding her killer.
In order to catch the assailant, you want to know about your victim. So I learned a lot about Missy right off the bat. As a father myself, she is the daughter every father would want. She was a wonderful, wonderful kid. She was a freshman at the University of Texas at Arlington. She was an honor student from a nearby high school. She was also in the band. She had very strong religious beliefs. A young lady with incredible integrity.
We found out she was also known to still be a virgin, which she apparently was not ashamed to tell people. The people who she worked with and associated with, they all were told that she had made that decision, that she was going to wait till after she was married.
Someone has robbed Missy of that future.
There were some effects to her body from the smoke, but you could still see that she had been beaten. Her legs were sprawled, hanging off the edge of the bed. She was wearing a shirt or a bra, but it was pulled up to her neck. It was burnt. Her panties were around her right ankle, and there was a pair of pants also on the floor. You could also see what appeared to be ligature marks.
To solve the murder, detectives will need to trace the last day of Missy Grubauer's young life.
Missy worked 2 different restaurant jobs, was working her way through college. We learned that within 24 hours or so of Missy's death, she worked.
She would stay and kind of decompress from her night's work, and then they would all call it a night and she went home. The last thing one knew from the workplace was that she had gone home alone sometime after 11 o'clock at night.
Detectives work to establish time of death.
In these type of cases, what you really want to find out is, was she killed before the fire or was she killed after the fire?
If a person is dead from a fire, they will have almost certainly inhaled some soot and smoke, and we'll see that to the naked eye. And so if we analyze the blood, we will see that there's an elevated saturation of carbon monoxide in their red blood cells. In Missy Gruber's case, there was no soot to be found. And when we ran the laboratory studies, there was no carbon monoxide detected. She actually died of a stab wound to the chest that perforated her heart. She was dead when the fire got to her, and she had not begun to decompose. It could have been minutes or hours.
So, in order to establish the time of the fire, we rely on the arson investigators. I rely on their expertise and their forensics.
Arson experts determined the fire started moments before the 911 call at 3:30 a.m. With Missy arriving home sometime after 11, this gives investigators a 4 to 5 hour window for the attack.
When someone attaches arson to their crime, there's two reasons to set that fire, and usually they go hand in hand. One reason is to destroy evidence. Another reason is to do what we call staging, and that is to try to disguise the death as something other than what the assailant actually did.
There was information coming in from the arson investigators that the source of the fire was the front door. And then there was a trail of accelerant that led back to the bedroom where Missy was found.
If a fire is set correctly, it can have devastating consequences for an investigation as far as forensic evidence. Investigating a death in which fire has been introduced to the crime scene makes that investigation 10 times harder.
Fortunately, there was less than complete destruction there at the apartment.
If fire doesn't have oxygen, it'll go out. And what happened was the assailant shut the bedroom door, left the apartment, and the absence of oxygen in the bedroom put the fire out. You can't help but destroy things when you set it on fire. But he didn't destroy what he intended to destroy.
We were able to collect a sexual assault kit that was usable.
A key piece of evidence from this crime scene was DNA, collected during the autopsy from the vaginal swabs. But in 1994, it usually took a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks to get your results back.
DNA is a very helpful tool in investigating a death, but it's only helpful if you have something to compare it to. When you have a suspect and their DNA, you can compare the DNA that you've collected from the body.
The very nature of this crime, the arson, the sexual assault, the brutality of it, and the violence really led us to worry that we have a serial killer or a serial rapist running around.
We've got someone out among us who is a violent offender. You've got a bad individual out there, without a doubt.
But what we find is people who stage crime scenes, especially with arson, they were always either associated or related to the victim.
There did not appear to be any forced entry that gave us some direction as to maybe this is an associate of Missy's.
The careful work of forensics uncovers a key clue.
We actually found some letters in her apartment. The letters were of a romantic nature. From reading it, you could tell this was a male.
They were seemingly like boyfriend-girlfriend type letters.
You could also see in the body of these letters that she was battling with her abstinence. You could see Missy was confused. You know, she wanted the romance, and she didn't know if this individual was going to settle for the limitations. She went a little too far with him, or was going to go a little too far with him, and she was feeling bad about that. The letters also expressed anger and maybe a little animosity towards Missy. Well, they were breaking up. We identified the person who was corresponding back and forth with Missy on these letters, and his name was Ivan.
Detectives learned that Ivan and Missy were co-workers at the restaurant.
This guy was a very primary person for us right away.
We did a background check on Ivan. We found that Ivan was a registered sex offender. Ivan was convicted for having a sexual relationship with a minor. The fact that Ivan did have a criminal background, the fact that there was a little bit of a volatile nature to their relationship, it's certainly a red flag.
Some people have a very hard time letting go of someone they're involved with, and they would rather see that person dead than with somebody else.
This makes him a really good suspect because that horrible sexual assault and brutal crime could simply have been triggered an explosion from him.
Arlington detectives have identified their first suspect in the hunt for Missy Grubaugh's killer, her boyfriend, Ivan.
We had very limited information, just the letters and so forth. But because of the state of their relationship, he's certainly going to be a primary focus at that time.
The detectives bring Ivan to the station.
Ivan's demeanor was very polite. He was very open, somewhat preppy, soft-spoken. Was certainly not a gangster or a tough guy. He seemed just somewhat, actually, to the point where he was rather meek. You could tell Ivan had feelings towards Missy, but he was also upset.
Despite their strained relationship, Ivan swears he had nothing to do with Missy's death.
Ivan said he respected Missy. He was leaning more to terminating the relationship as opposed to pursuing it. He wasn't aggravated. It was basically fading away on his part. Missy did not want it to go away. He did.
Ivan tells Lenore he was home alone on the night of her death.
Ivan did not have an alibi for his whereabouts during the time frame that Missy was killed.
You've got his background as a person who's been convicted of sexual assault, and you've got no alibi, and you've got a dead body. That makes him a very strong suspect.
In this particular case, we had forensic evidence.
Ivan did not have any problem with providing blood, hair, all of those samples necessary to do comparisons with the samples that were taken at the autopsy.
But I knew there was not going to be a forensic exclusion of any person of interest prior to 6, 8, possibly even 10 weeks. But during the interview with Ivan, he was very suspicious of an individual who he believed was responsible for Missy's death. That individual was Jeff Smith. He had worked with Missy at the restaurant. Ivan had told us Jeff Smith saw himself as a ladies' man, and Jeff Smith was pursuing Missy and did so in probably not the most respectful manner. She did not respond to his advances, and that just fueled his animosity towards her.
Jeffrey was someone who sort of had a grudge against Missy because of something that occurred at the restaurant.
He's fired from where they work together, and he immediately assumes that Missy is responsible for getting him fired.
If you were to go back in history, I think that love and lust and betrayal would probably be the #1 reason why people end up dead.
Ivan says Jeff Smith's anger soon took a disturbing turn.
Smith started issuing threats to actually harm Missy.
Many death threats are emotion-based over domestic issues, financial issues. Is it important in an investigation because it tells you the mindset of the individual the day they said it? Yes, it's important. It's evidence. And it should be treated as such.
We were trying to find Jeffrey Smith, and he seemed to never be where we thought he was going to be. When we would show up to try to interview this guy, he was always somewhere else. The more time goes by that he doesn't make himself available, it takes it to a more suspicious level.
That was actually able to locate his girlfriend. They were living together in an apartment in Arlington, and she agreed to come to the station and speak with me. The girlfriend informed us that Jeff Smith was emotionally unstable. He was also very volatile. He had a hair-trigger temper. She was very cautious of him, actually somewhat fearful of him.
Normal, non-controlling men don't typically commit murders. It's a certain type of person who gets jealous, gets angry. And so if friends and family members describe a man as being controlling, that has some significance if you're a police officer or a lawyer trying to figure out whether the person did it.
Jeff Smith's girlfriend implied that she believed that Jeff Smith could have been responsible as well for the murder of Missy Grubauer. Now we have somebody that has motive. We have a very recent situation that could have easily exploded into violence and a sexual assault. That's everything this guy could have done.
Detectives press the girlfriend for details on Smith's timeline.
Jeff Smith was supposed to have been with her on the night of Missy's death, and he was not. And she couldn't find him. And then the following morning, she found a note on her windshield from Jeff Smith, who was apologizing because he didn't come home, claiming that he was with some friends. So the fact that Jeff Smith should have been at the apartment and he wasn't, and that was the night that Missy was killed, and you add that into this volatile relationship and the threats towards Missy, becomes a primary suspect at that point.
Jeff Smith's girlfriend has given police enough to make him the prime suspect in Missy Grubauer's murder.
The additional information that Jeff Smith was supposed to have been with her on the night of Missy's death, and he was not, added fuel to that suspicion. I started thinking that we may be pretty close.
After days of chasing him, his girlfriend helps detectives track him down.
I think the best way to describe him is a con man wannabe. He was cocky, he thought he was cool, he thought he was a smooth talker, thinking that he's gonna sit in there with me and just blow smoke all day long and I'm gonna believe it. Jeff Smith downplayed the alleged threats and so forth towards Missy. Matter of fact, he turned it around and said that she was the one pursuing him. She was the one who had the hots for him, which I knew was an absolute lie. Jeff Smith denied any allegation of being violent and volatile. I mean, he paints himself as a great guy. I'm a good guy. Sure, I have problems like everybody else, but no, I wouldn't hurt anybody. Whoever's telling you this is just feeding you a bunch of bull. I don't think there were two words that came out of Jeff Smith's mouth that I believed. We have someone who is violent towards women. We have someone who wants to be controlling towards women. We have someone we definitely know does not like to be rejected by women, which makes him a really good suspect because sexual assaults are power plays. I can picture him as the kind of guy that thinks he's smarter than the police. So he's the guy that's gonna set the fire and fool us and send us off in another direction.
However strong the detective's suspicions, everything hinges on where Smith was the night of the crime.
Jeff told me that he was with his girlfriend that night, after midnight. I knew he wasn't because the girlfriend said otherwise. That just solidified what I knew about this guy, and that is, he's lying, he's lying, he's lying. What's interesting, though, is he does agree to give me his blood and his hair and his saliva, knowing that it's going to be compared to the sexual assault examination of Missy Grubauer. I've had guilty people over the years cooperate. The bad part about that, we don't know the answer for 6 to 8 weeks down the road. So I continue the investigation, working on my victimology, wanting to know more about Missy, wanting to know more about what her lifestyle was. Who could have done this?
Detectives learn that a colleague from the restaurant stayed with Missy in the weeks prior to her death.
His name was Charles. Charles, frankly, is probably one of the closest to Missy that we knew, other than Ivan. He was kind of down on his luck, didn't have a lot of money, needed a place to stay, and Missy, having the incredible big heart that she has, she actually allowed him to stay with her at her apartment, and he slept on the sofa.
Charles soon takes advantage of Missy's good intentions.
Charles steals the money out of her tip jar. Missy, being the good and wonderful kid that she is, she's also not going to put up with anything as well. She called the police department. The Arlington police made a report, and they actually issued a warrant for his arrest for theft. And Charles fled. We believe that he was still in Arlington at the time of her death. Obviously, the motive here is revenge. And he is certainly an individual that we need to find and talk to. But of course, we're on edge because we don't know where he's at. We found out that he's reportedly fled Texas.
If you're already focused in on an individual and they disappear or take off somewhere for an extended period of time, it would be of great interest to me if they were a suspect. The person has a lot of explaining to do as to why they didn't commit the murder.
Police now have 3 of Missy's work colleagues, all under investigation.
At this stage, Jeff Smith is still my primary suspect. We certainly are interested in waiting on lab results to come back on Ivan. And we would like to catch Charles, who is a fugitive. But we don't have forensics on him because we haven't had the opportunity.
Good police detectives will keep an open mind. If there are numerous suspects, you've got to investigate each of them equally with the hopes that at some point in the investigation, you're going to catch a break against one of them.
I go by the belief that you just don't wake up one morning and commit a crime of this nature. Not this extreme, not this demented and sick and evil.
We want to be able to efficiently and effectively find out who this offender is. As bad an individual as this person is, they need to be removed from the general population, and I'd like to keep them away from my son and daughter as well.
What happens next takes everyone by surprise.
Jeff Smith kidnapped his girlfriend. You leave the police department, you're telling me what a great, wonderful guy you are, and now he kidnaps his girlfriend. I mean, this guy is just out of control, but he's out of control in a very violent, felonious way. He is a walking time bomb. And if he's capable of doing what happened to Missy, he can do it again, especially now, because now he's really just incredibly dangerous. He was a fugitive, nowhere to be found. And he's a wanted felon, so to say that we were on edge is an understatement. And to say that there was an urgency to find Jeff Smith is an understatement.
Before Smith can be found, his terrified girlfriend surfaces.
He did eventually release her, but he didn't turn himself into the police. We found out that the girlfriend is okay, but in speaking with her, we were not able to get any information that would have led us to Jeff Smith's whereabouts.
Trying to find him was very difficult, and he was in a lot of trouble for what occurred.
At this stage in an investigation, when you have a primary suspect and you feel very comfortable that you're looking in the right direction and you can't lay hands on them, knowing how volatile they are, we had an investigative team that collectively was focused on getting Jeff Smith apprehended.
As the manhunt continues, the DNA tests on Jeff Smith and Ivan return. Both are negative.
If you're innocent, you're really glad there is DNA evidence available, because the same things that are such strong pieces of evidence to convict a killer can clear an innocent person.
We're humans. We have hope. God, I hope this is him. I hope this is him. But at the same time, we also know DNA is as solid as you can get as far as excluding somebody. I've also learned through my experience, you are usually going to clear a multitude of suspects before you ever find your actual perpetrator. Charles is still a primary suspect. We don't know where he's at, but you have to always be aware of the possibility that there are other suspects. That we could also have a predator out there that's not known to anyone. And we are on pins and needles.
Statistically, solvability continues to decrease as time moves forward. So you've got to get the offender located and prosecuted as soon as possible.
Going in the many different directions we're going was when I received a phone call from Missy's mother that completely changed the entire course of this investigation. Just like everybody else, other relatives and friends, she is just beating herself up saying, who could have done this, and trying to remember anything. And she recalled the day of the murder. Missy telling her on the telephone about a man whose name was Luis. And Luis is a 32-year-old man who lives in the apartment complex. He has a common-law wife, and he has a small child that Missy babysits. Well, before the mother finished all of that, she has my attention, because this guy came out of the blue. The mother continues that Luis would come over to Missy's apartment during the early morning hours, sometimes late at night, 11, 12 at night, wanting to talk to Missy, telling Missy that he believes his wife is cheating on him. And he wants to talk to her in person because he's afraid his wife would hear him talking on the telephone.
But that on this day before the incident, he was apparently over at her apartment and they were joking around. And they had what Missy described as a sort of a pillow fight.
I'm thinking a 32-year-old man over here getting into a pillow fight. When I heard all of this, I mean, my stomach dropped.
Detectives learn that Luis Arroyo also works with Missy at the restaurant.
So he works with her, he lives in the same complex, she babysits his child, comes over late at night, and he's 32 years old and she's 19. This was jaw-dropping. We need to talk to this man. This is just not normal.
Detectives have focused their attention on the strange behavior of Missy's neighbor, Luis Arroyo.
Asked if he'd come speak with me. We sat down, he was polite, cooperative, you know, fairly good-looking guy, looks in shape, good manners, very pleasant individual, very smart individual. I explained to Luis that I was investigating the death of Missy Grubal. He projected himself as just, oh, it's horrible. He was sad. I knew her. This is really horrible. I hope you solve the case. What can I do to help? So I just started explaining to Luis what my goal was, and he immediately asked me if I found the gas can. The cause and the origin of the fire was not public, all right? No one said anything about a gas can. No reason he should have known that.
When somebody tells you that they have information that's more than what you would read in the morning newspaper, you need to sort of take another tactic and look at this person in a different way. That changed the complexion of this interview to where Detective Lenore had to advise Luis that the things that he might say could be used against him in a court.
With Missy's call to her mother confirming his visit the previous day, police need to determine if he was in the apartment the moment she died.
I explained to Luis, the way I'm going to exclude the innocent in this particular case is we have forensic evidence that will not only identify the perpetrator, but it'll exclude innocent parties. That's when Luis started getting very nervous. And he said, what evidence wasn't she burnt up? And I said, well, Luis, the problem with the perpetrator in this case is he didn't do a very good job at destroying evidence, if in fact that was his goal. Because we do have evidence. We have DNA evidence that the perpetrator left behind. But Luis, the good news for you is this DNA will also exclude you, and then I can move on. So with that said, I would like you to give me your blood and your saliva sample so that we can compare it to the DNA and get you excluded. And he said, well, I can't do this right now. I have to take my son to the park. And I said, Luis, come with me for a minute. I had Luis stand up, and we walked over to a window, and I said, it's pouring down rain. You're not going to the park in pouring rain. He goes, well, I've got to go. I just remembered it. I have to leave.
It was very odd that suddenly this individual who was thought to be agreeable to having his samples taken and do whatever it would take, in his own words, to get himself eliminated as being involved in this murder, suddenly wasn't able to make the time to provide the samples.
We had no probable cause. I had no evidence to arrest him. I mean, I don't issue an arrest warrant based on my gut. I issue it based on evidence. So I said, well, are we going to do this? And Luis said, yes, we're going to do it. And I said, when? And Luis says, call me tomorrow, and we'll set it up. I said, okay. And he left.
With Aoyo now their top suspect, the detectives go back to the co-workers he shared with Missy.
One of the employees was talking about how Luis was so distraught over the death of Missy Grubeau, and that he really hoped they'd catch the killer that raped and murdered Missy. The fact that Missy was sexually assaulted was not public. It wasn't revealed to Luis Aoyo when I interviewed him that day. We just simply said we have DNA and that it wasn't burned up. That could be anywhere. That could be anything. But he specifically said to co-workers that she was sexually assaulted. Only the killer would know that.
When police visit Arroyo's home, they hit another problem.
He had left. And at that time, his wife wasn't sure exactly where he went, but that he'd gone out the previous evening and she hadn't heard from him since then.
I had to explain to her, listen, I'm investigating the murder of Missy Grubeau. I need to speak to Luis because he knows her. She babysits y'all's son. Because of that, he's a suspect. What can you tell me about that night?
So Louise's wife came to the station voluntarily and provided a lengthy written statement.
On the night of Missy's death, about 10 o'clock at night, Luis's wife heard Luis go out. Now that's not unusual because he normally goes for a jog. She's awakened later by the sound of Luis coming inside and taking a shower. In her mind, he's done his jog, but then he leaves the apartment a second time. He returns, he takes a shower again. So she gets up, she demands to know what's going on. Luis tells his wife that while he was out jogging, he heard a woman screaming. Running in the direction of those screams led him to an apartment, and he sees that the door is ajar. So he runs in there, and he sees a woman laying nude on the bed. There was blood in the middle of her chest. There was no pulse. So he attempts CPR, but he couldn't stay there because the smoke and the fire was so overwhelming. and he told his wife, I believe that was Missy, who I saw. He didn't call 911. Why would you not call 911 after you've seen all of this? All of this was very suspicious. The bond between a husband and a wife, that's tight, and by nature, even in illegal acts, they'll want to cover for their loved one, or they'll want to protect them. I have to ask myself, well, why didn't the wife come to me and tell me this the day of the murder? Was it denial? And so as I'm explaining to her what we know, I believe that during the course of that interview with her, she just realized, my God, he did this.
The wife of Luis Arroyo's statement to police places him in Missy Grubaugh's apartment. They must now track him down.
She informed me that Luis is in San Antonio and he's staying with her parents. He was arrested by the San Antonio Police Department and transported to the county jail. When I came face to face with Luis, this was not the same person that I had talked to a short time earlier. Completely different human being. Incredibly withdrawn, slumped over, head down. I guess one of the ways you want to describe it is just a beaten person. I don't know what made Luis suddenly just open up as much as he did, because what's interesting is this, he does open up.
Luis started with that they were going to have consensual sex, and that it was completely agreed upon by Missy that that would occur.
He claimed that it was a tender, wonderful moment, which we know to be absolutely hogwash. That didn't happen.
He had found the knife, which was just a kitchen knife. We pretty much allowed him to indicate where he stabbed the victim.
Then he puts on what I believe is this show of falling on the floor and crawling around and acting like you're losing your mind. That was just a show. With all that said, he provided enough to solidify and to support evidence it was him, that he did do it.
With Arroyo's confession in hand, detectives put together everything they know of the events leading up to Missy Grubaugh's death.
At approximately 10 p.m., he leaves his apartment under the pretense of doing his jog. After 11 o'clock, he goes to see Missy. He knocks on the door. He does that all the time. She's not alarmed by it. She allows him inside. And during the time Luis Arroyo is in that apartment with Missy Grubaugh, he rapes and murders her. After he kills Missy, he has to do something. He has to destroy the evidence. So he gets in his car, he goes to a gas station and fills up a 1-gallon gas can. Goes back to Missy's apartment, goes into her bedroom. He douses her with gas and all around the bed, in the apartment, in the bedroom, up to the door, lights the fire, shuts the door, and leaves. He goes back home. He showers. After he showers, he wants to go back to the apartment to make sure that it's on fire. He goes back to the apartment and it's not on fire. The reason being is because there was not enough oxygen in that room from shutting the door. He sets a second fire. After that, he goes back to his apartment again. He showers, cleans up. Luis Arroyo is a textbook psychopath. I mean, this guy's a predator.
A case like this is a sad thing. It makes you angry that somebody would waste somebody else's life like this for such a thing as a sexual assault.
The DNA analysis returned, and as we expected. The matches were statistically amazing that it would be anyone else but Louise.
Despite the overwhelming evidence, Aoyo backtracks.
Luis Arroyo pled not guilty. We had a trial. The defense tried to explain the actions as something other than the psychotic predator that he is. And the jury didn't buy it and convicted Luis Arroyo of capital murder.
In January 1997, Luis Arroyo is sentenced to life without parole. Charles was never prosecuted for the theft charge. Jeff Smith was sentenced to 4 years in prison for the kidnapping.
What's justice? I mean, nothing compares to what happened to Missy Grubau. Nothing.
It would never bring back your family member. It would never bring back a daughter. But in the society in which we live, that's about all that we can hope for. That we do identify the offender and let the justice system do the rest.
I feel better knowing that Luis Arroyo is no longer on the streets. But once that sense of comfort wears off, the fear sets in that there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Luis Arroyos running around out there.
She was a loving mother. She loved her family.
A brutal killing.
The force that was applied to her throat was adequate to fracture her voice box.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
There had been an argument, and he knew that she was fixing to tell the whole world. He could move around through the neighborhood and not be noticed. He was bragging about being the one that killed Charlotte.
The truth will be revealed.
I think the web that he had put up started to unravel. He knew this whole little world was coming crashing down. He exploded.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Lynette, Alabama. A quiet, slow-moving community near the Georgia border.
Lynette is a small town. It's a rural-type town, probably 6,000 people. Everybody knows everybody.
Little quirk of the thing is that because so many of the people who live in the Lynette area work in Georgia, the governments of the local area have adopted the Eastern time zone as their standard, whereas just 5 miles out of town, you're in the Central time zone. It's commonly referred to as slow time and fast time.
We don't have very many murders. Most of the time, you might have one a year. Some years you go with none.
When the patrol arrived on scene, they were met by a female running out the door. She was screaming at them, "Help my mother, help my mother."
Inside the home, police find the body of 49-year-old Charlotte Waits, who her daughter Heather discovered a few minutes earlier.
She was a loving mother. She loved her family. She loved her work.
Miss Waits was a person that didn't meet a stranger. She knew everybody. She could speak to everybody.
She was generally loved in the community.
Lieutenant Richard Carter must quickly determine how Charlotte died.
You're not specifically looking for anything when you walk into a crime scene, but you're paying attention the moment you pull in the driveway.
The medics stated that it could have been a seizure because they saw foam in her mouth. She had a dislocated wrist. Our first impression was, could she have fallen down the stairs? But as we started looking around, there was other indicators that led us to believe that something else may have occurred. We noticed that there was some bloodstains on her blouse that didn't match what we were looking at on her body. There was no blood coming out of her mouth or out of her nose.
And then there were finger marks on her neck that appeared to have been from somebody choking her. It became obvious that the injuries that she had suffered from were not consistent with somebody who had just fallen downstairs. The cause of death was strangulation and blunt force trauma. The force that was applied to her throat was adequate to fracture her voice box.
They used so much force that when they slammed her to the floor, not only did it cause fractures to her skull, but it also caused her orbital socket to fracture.
Charlotte's husband, Barry Waits, arrives home and is confronted with the news that his wife has been murdered.
Barry Waits was our interim mayor, but he ran the National Guard Armory. You know, he was a man of prominence, a very well liked and an appreciated person. He was distraught. He began to have issues where he couldn't breathe. He was grabbing his chest, so we sat him down on the couch. I thought he was having a heart attack. We called the medics. They took him to the hospital. Turned out to be an anxiety attack. With the stress of the whole situation.
Miss Waits was very well thought of. And her murder demanded answers, especially in a small, tight-knit community.
She had no known enemies. She had no known vices. She had no known debts.
So the pressure was unreal.
To find Charlotte's killer, detectives must retrace the events of her final day. They begin by narrowing down the time of death.
We wanted to make that window as small as we could. That's why timelines are so important, not only with the victims, but any suspects that you develop that you need to eliminate. When we started looking at Charlotte's movement that day, she had gone to her school resource center position, arrived at a normal time. That afternoon, she was scheduled to go to a baby shower, so she left work early to go get her hair cut. We have confirmed that she had gotten that haircut. She was gonna go home and wash her hair, change clothes, and then come back and meet the ladies and then go to the baby shower. And when she never showed back up, they became concerned.
The lady from school tried to call her at about 1 o'clock on both the house phone and her cell phone, and she didn't answer.
And then her oldest daughter, Heather, she got home that afternoon and found her mother unresponsive in the floor. Immediately called 911.
Between the time Charlotte left the salon at noon and the unanswered phone call at 1 p.m., there's a narrow 1-hour window for the attack.
The daughter told us when she walked in that she found the door slightly ajar, which was unusual. We did a perimeter search. We noted that there was no forced entry in any doors. Windows were locked.
The thrust and focus of the law enforcement to begin with was that it was an intruder possibly who had come into the house and committed the crime. But there were prescription medications in her purse, and there was money in her purse, which was right there by her body. There were televisions, there were other items that would readily have been grabbed by some burglar, and none of that was taken.
And we did lift several fingerprints from the immediate area, somewhere in the stairwell, somewhere on the door frames at the front door and at the interior door frame. There was a pile of clothes laying in front of the washing machine, and we found 2 towels that had bloodstains on them. And right away, that was very suspicious to us.
Charlotte Waite's DNA was on the towel. Someone had taken those towels back to the laundry room and then come back essentially by her body to get out of the house. I mean, that's a significant issue to me, that somebody had to know or care about her for them to bother to take the blood off of her. And secondly, to take the bloody towels to the laundry room, put them in the laundry basket. No, that doesn't happen. Strangers just don't do that.
Evidence from the crime scene indicates to police that Charlotte Waits was killed by someone she knew.
So at that time, we had to start with those that knew the family the closest. As in any homicide, you start inside and you work out.
Rumblings of a recent family fallout over an inheritance catches their attention.
Charlotte had an uncle named Ben Brown who had passed away a year to Charlotte's death.
They were divvying up among the people who were heirs to the estate, and there had been a cousin who filed a lawsuit saying that he should have been included and that he was due to get a share of the estate.
The cousin, Wayne Rice, had always been part of the family, but when Wayne started contesting the will and the inheritance, that caused some friction within the family, so at that point, they quit talking to each other. A lot of murders occur for financial reasons, greed, so we took it serious. A local attorney told us the night that Charlotte was killed that there was an appointment set up. Charlotte and her husband, Barry, were to meet with the attorney about it.
With Charlotte killed earlier in the day, that meeting never took place.
So Mr. Rice became the possible suspect.
You really find out somebody's true personality when you start fighting over money. I've seen people get shot over 12 inches of land. If you're due something, you're going to stand up for your rights and you're going to request what's yours. Emotions get high. I'm sure he felt very slighted.
Could he have done it? He was the first one that we needed to make sure didn't.
They bring Wayne Rice in for questioning about where he was the day of the murder.
Wayne Rice worked at an aluminum processing plant. He told us he was at work that day.
Wayne Rice was such a creature of habit. Wayne's colleague said that you could actually set your watch by what Wayne did during what part of the day and at what times.
They checked him out. His alibi was totally clean. There was no question about him being there. Mr. Rice could not have had any connection with Charlotte that morning.
Rice also says that his issue wasn't with Charlotte.
Charlotte was in favor of just giving in and giving him some of the money. So he had no real motive to have killed her. Probably she was his greatest ally in his quest for getting some of the money.
He told me that Charlotte was really bothered that that family was being torn apart over money and property. She didn't think anything was worth losing your family for.
The day after the attack, Barry Waits is released from the hospital.
Barry came to the police department, and we took that opportunity to interview him.
Barry had been at the National Guard Armory most of the morning, left there just shortly before 12.
He said that when he left the armory, he told some other colleagues of his that he was going to get a haircut. He went by the barbershop, but it was full, so he didn't stop.
Barry says he then went to purchase a battery for his daughter's cell phone.
Then he went back to work, and he stayed at work until he got the phone call from his daughter. We did speak to his supervisor, and he had received a fax from Barry. The fax had a date and a time on it, which told us what time that we know he was at the armory.
Barry's time seems to be fully accounted for.
He was a well-respected man of the community, and his whole reaction seemed natural. A distraught husband whose wife has just been found deceased.
Barry does provide the name of someone he thinks could be responsible.
Barry brings law enforcement's attention to the fact that his youngest daughter had a boyfriend named Dave.
Kara's boyfriend, Dave, was not liked by Barry or Charlotte. Dave was always into something alcohol-related. He was not someone that you'd want your daughter to date. He probably felt like they were looking at him as a second-class citizen. I think that Dave was upset by that. After Barry and Charlotte told Kara to quit seeing Dave, we did find out that they continued with their relationship behind their backs.
I've worked cases where a young lady actually talked an older boyfriend into killing her parents so they could be together. So, that was something that I did pay attention to.
We interviewed Dave. He was a little frustrated that we were even there questioning him. It got under his skin. He said he had no reason to kill her. He knew that they didn't like him. He's done some stupid things in his life, but he's never killed anybody. He told us that he had been at work that day cutting grass and hadn't even been in the area the whole day.
We confirmed with his landscaping company that Dave was at work during that time.
But we also submitted his prints along with the prints that we collected at the scene. None of those prints come back to him. We comfortably felt that he had nothing to do with the case.
Despite this, Police still believe Charlotte shared a connection with the person who attacked her.
Now, this neighborhood that Charlotte lived in, it was an upper middle class neighborhood. A lot of retired people lived there. When we're working these investigations, we tell everybody, no matter how small it is, tell us. We'll make a determination if it's important or if it's not. A lot of times, those small pieces of information they build up, no little piece of information is useless. We got a tip that a few doors down from Charlotte lived a young guy, Evan Johnston. He was a juvenile that we had dealt with for several years, breaking into houses, stealing, drugs. He could move around through the neighborhood and not be noticed.
Charlotte would have known Evan through the school system and through the neighborhood. He would have been very familiar to her.
Evan had told someone that he had planned to break into the Waits house, that he knew that there was some cash there. We felt that if Evan was the one that committed this crime, that Charlotte would have had to interrupt a burglary, and then he would have to kill her because she knew him, he knew her.
If you're breaking into a house to steal spare change and someone comes into the kitchen and you get caught, you could be looking at 10 years in jail. So there are many instances where a person, in order to avoid being caught for a minor crime, commit a much more serious crime.
Police look into Evan's whereabouts around the time of the murder.
We find out that he all of a sudden left town and went to Arkansas. And we thought, well, that's strange.
Anytime you have a suspect who does leave town shortly after a crime has been committed, you immediately think, this is our prime suspect. This is the guy who committed this crime.
Police have tracked down their latest suspect in the murder of Charlotte Waits, Evan Johnston.
We thought, this is it. This is the guy who did it. You know, he fits the mold. So we sent our investigator out to Arkansas to interview Evan.
They question him about his sudden departure from Alabama.
He tells them that this trip was something he planned to do. Evan told our investigator that on the day that Charlotte was killed, that he was over at a friend's house playing video games. He told us that the boy's mother had come in and saw him there. We went over there and interviewed his friend and his mother, and both of them confirmed that, yes, that did occur.
Another one of the factors that went into the consideration of whether Evan might have been the possible person who committed this crime was the fact that he was much smaller.
You had a pretty serious, heinous crime, and you had to go, would this young guy been able to have choked her out?
Well, as a matter of fact, Miss Charlotte probably could have beat his butt and kicked him out of the house.
They were able to rule him out as a suspect.
He just wasn't the one.
As Evan Johnston is eliminated, Lieutenant Carter receives a new lead.
We'd gotten a Crime Stopper tip. The man by the name of Kenny had been at a party and was bragging about being the one that killed Charlotte Waits.
He had had brushes with the law in the past, had committed petty thefts and some burglaries and other crimes of that nature.
He always wanted to be a gang member. He was always looking for that association. And that was one of the things that was appealing to us when his name came up, was that he would be a good suspect. He never had a criminal history of any assaults, but we knew that he was headed down that road, that one day he might kill somebody.
Kenny's boast suggests he may well have taken his crimes to a new level.
If you get somebody who's bragged that they did a crime, that's often the solution to the whole puzzle, and you're finished.
The best criminals keep their mouths shut. They just go about their business, commit the crimes, and don't tell anybody about it. Because the best ones know that if you start talking, you're going to get caught.
Kenny could have broken in the house. He could have been the person that done this to Miss Waits.
We got excited. This is the break that we needed. So we went and found Kenny, interviewed him. And he denied having any knowledge of what it was I was talking about, said he'd never been to Charlotte's house.
Among other things, Kenny had an alibi that was probably one of the most unusual ones you'll find.
Kenny told us that he was with another guy named Larry.
They claimed to have been stealing cigarettes from another store when all this took place.
Then they would go to another part of town, sell those cigarettes for crack. They'd go to another location, smoke the crack, go back to the store, steal more cigarettes, and they just spent the day doing this. We went to and obtained the surveillance videos, but the video system that store had wasn't great, and there was multiple entrances to the stores, so we could never say he was actually there.
But with Kenny having named his friend Larry as part of his alibi, police have a second chance to determine his guilt.
At that point, we found out that Larry was in a prison in Georgia. So we made a trip to the prison. Larry told us the same thing, that they had been shoplifting cigarettes.
He confirmed Kenny's story.
An experienced police officer will give little to no weight to an inmate unless the information can be corroborated by other outside sources. And only then will an experienced police officer give it any weight.
With Kenny and Larry's story matching up, they look to the crime scene evidence for a definitive answer.
Kenny's fingerprints were not in the house. We didn't find anything to match him being there at all.
Police are also unable to find any personal connection between Kenny and Charlotte.
The only nexus we had to Kenny being at Miss Waits' house was the story from the party. And Kenny vehemently denies that conversation, and his exact words to me was, "Why in the hell would I kill Miss Charlotte?" The tipster did not come across credible at all. He was trying to get money and trying to throw Kenny under the bus for a crime that Kenny did not commit.
People often will brag about crimes that they didn't commit because it gives them greater status among their gangbanger friends in the community.
When we eliminate him from our suspect list, our disappointment level is bottomed out. You know, you're back to the frustration of, now we're back to square one. We're on fire to go get with these guys. And then when it turns out that they had nothing to do with it, where do we go?
Just as the case begins to stall, detectives receive information that sets it back into motion.
We received a call from a member of the Chamber of Commerce.
He told us that Barry had been scheduled to be at a ribbon-cutting affair in Lynette the day this all occurred, and he didn't make it.
This ribbon cutting had been scheduled several weeks in advance, so it's not something that he didn't know about.
Barry would not have missed an event of that nature without having had some real serious something going on that kept him from being able to be there.
That raised some flags.
So then we started picking away at what he said he did. When we were trying to verify his alibi at work, we went and we spoke to 2 or 3 people that were at the armory that day. What we found out was that they had left prior to him, so we couldn't verify any of his coming or going times.
The one thing they do have is the fax he sent that afternoon.
We had a concrete time of when that fax was sent, and it was only sent by him because he was the only one at the armory at the time.
But the critical issue of his timeline was that he told people that he'd left work and had gone to some other businesses around the town.
Talked to the barber. He said, no, he said, I never saw him come by. So then we went to the cell phone company, and what we found out there was that he didn't go when he said he did. It was several hours later.
And so there were considerable discrepancies in what he told the initial investigating officers and what the evidence itself bore out in terms of where he went and why he was there. And so it would have been nothing for him to go home and have an argument with his wife, kill her, and get back to the National Guard Army by the time he got back that afternoon. In fact, he'd have had time to spare. I don't think anybody initially would have even dreamed of thinking of him as the primary suspect.
Now he's left as the only one who we're unable to eliminate.
As the prime suspect in the brutal death of his wife, Charlotte, Mayor Barry Waits must now prove his innocence.
We offered Barry a polygraph exam. He was asked questions such as, did you kill your wife? Did you have anything to do with your wife's murder? And on each of those questions, he was deceptive. He failed the polygraph.
Believing Barry had both means and opportunity, it becomes a question of motive.
One of the things we have to do is look at what kind of financial issues does the family have. And in doing so, we discovered some things that were pretty concerning to us.
His family had entrusted him to manage some funds that his mother had, and as I recall, it was in excess of $100,000 that had just been put in his care for him to spend for her needs and for her benefit.
Mr. Waits had also been taking money from the armory. Money is supposed to be allotted to take care of the day-to-day operations. He had started funneling into his own account.
But by the time of Charlotte's death, he had spent all of that money. We calculated what all he went through. It was $500,000 to $1 million that he had gone through in a period of about 2 years or less.
Some people are in very, very serious, dire financial straits. You'll have people who have been killed for literally a few dimes. You'll have other people who are killed for millions of dollars. Money's historically been one of the greatest motives for murder from the beginning of time.
Detectives consider what Barry was doing with the embezzled funds.
We could not find any significant gambling habits. We could not find any connections with women. We could not find certainly couldn't find any drug habits or anything of that nature that would have caused him to need the amount of money that he was spending. The only thing that we could consider that he might have been doing was day trading.
This implies he was using the money to cover his losses on the stock market.
Charlotte made a pretty decent salary herself, probably made at least as much as Barry made. So I doubt that she ever had an inkling that Barry had pulled all these financial shenanigans.
He had an image to uphold where people thought they were the perfect family, that they were financially well off, and neither of which is the case.
The web that Barry had put up started to unravel.
Their inquiry into Barry's finances leads police to a new discovery on Charlotte's timeline.
We found out through her colleagues at the School Resource Center that morning that she was killed while she was at work. She received a phone call from Barry. There was a heated conversation.
This is all 10 or so o'clock.
And when she hung up, she apologized to the lady and said there was an incident of some sort the night previous between her and her husband.
Detectives learned the couple had fought over the settlement, set to go to Charlotte's cousin, Wayne Rice.
The estate by that time had gotten down to, in cash, $100,000 or so left. And they were talking about giving Wayne Rice around $50,000 to settle his claims against the estate.
Charlotte wanted to settle the estate. She wanted to offer this settlement. Barry didn't want her to do that.
With Charlotte unaware how desperate Barry was for money, the argument became heated.
She came away very angry and told her coworker, said, look, I know you're fixing to get married, but I want to tell you, those men will drive you crazy.
So it was an argument the night before, an argument that morning. We feel that the reason he went home was to continue that argument, to try and talk her out of making the settlement. And ultimately, we think that that's what led to the homicide.
The proverbial noose was tightening around Mr. Waits.
Despite the revelations, the case against Charlotte's husband remains circumstantial.
Circumstantial evidence can be extremely compelling, and it can often be enough to build a case. Whether it'll hold up during a trial is another matter. So it's not always good enough.
We never really received what I always called was that silver bullet. That would be the nail in the coffin.
By this point, suspicions surrounding the town's mayor is public knowledge.
You know how small communities are. Everybody knows everything about everybody else's business. So I think, quite frankly, that most of the community had concluded that he must be guilty by that time.
Even Mr. Waits had told various people that they probably have enough to indict me, but not enough to convict me.
Without sufficient evidence, Charlotte's murderer risks going unpunished.
Every detective has unsolved homicides. It is something that stays with them. It is something that bothers them, and it is something that they will not forget. It's unfinished business.
Almost a decade after the death of Charlotte Waits, her husband Barry continues to walk free despite widespread belief he's responsible.
When you're investigating a case and you know who your killer is, you know where he is, it's frustrating. And they've put so much effort and time into it. They're not just going to say, oh, we've hit another wall, we're dropping it. I think the more walls you hit, it's like anything else. You keep going back and what am I missing?
I told her daughters this from the very beginning, that I promised them. I said, your mother's case would never go in a file cabinet. It would always be right here, and we'd always work it. And even when they got mad with the police department and broke contact, it stayed right there.
Now adults, police return to the daughters, hoping they will cooperate.
In the beginning, they felt like we were after their dad, trying to frame their dad. Later on, as things progress and time goes by, they start seeing other things
Lieutenant Carter slowly gets them to open up about Barry's activities since their mother's death.
Barry told his own daughters that they were suspects in the murder of their mother. And I think the purpose in him doing that was to literally to prevent them from talking to the police so that they couldn't give the police any information that would have been incriminating against him.
Told us the insurance company wouldn't pay Charlotte's life insurance to Barry because he was listed as a suspect. But he was able to convince the insurance to pay his daughters, give them the money. And then behind the scenes, Barry told them, if you'll give me the cash, I'll give you the land from this state. They give him $250,000 cash. Well, he never signed the property over. And that really was the opener to them. When he started stealing and scamming from them, stealing their inheritance, lying to them, then they realized, why should we not think that he's capable of doing this to our mother?
With Barry's own daughters prepared to testify against him, it gives the prosecution team the confidence they need.
Finally, I was convinced that it was a valid, circumstantial evidence murder case, and that it should go ahead and go forward to trial.
Let's roll the dice and let the jury handle it.
The state of Alabama charged Mr. Waits with her death, and it was my job to make sure that she got justice. This was a tough trial because, they had lost their mother. If I did my job correctly, they were going to lose their father.
In 2006, Barry Waits faces trial for the murder of his wife. Critical to the prosecution is the timeline of Charlotte's final day.
That morning, Charlotte went to her office at about 8 o'clock. She received a phone call from Barry at 10. She became angry during the conversation. At about 11 o'clock, she left there to go to the beauty shop and then went home at around 12 o'clock.
Charlotte washed her hair. She had her dress laid out that she was going to change into. She never got to that point. Barry left the armory.
He came home and they had the argument about the Ben Brown estate.
Fight started, and she was trying to get away from him. She probably told him something like, well, that's not your money, that's my money. I'm gonna do what I want to do.
He knew that his whole little world was coming crashing down. And he exploded.
His reaction was, now I gotta cover this up. So I think that's when he took her purse and poured it out.
I think he may have, in fact, had time there and then to regret what he had done. Otherwise, he would not have cleaned the blood from her face, for example. Took the towels to the laundry room, put them down on top of the laundry hamper.
He knew he had to get back to Center Facts just to say, hey, I was here. He didn't realize that we could fill in the holes prior to him getting there.
Even without any physical proof, it only takes the jury a few hours to find Barry guilty of murdering his wife, Charlotte. He's sentenced to 40 years in prison.
When he was convicted, one of the things that bolstered my belief that I had the right person, there was no showing of emotion. He basically said nothing.
I saw a family destroyed. The girls, they should have never had to go through what they went through. It was just a closure, I didn't feel gratified, but I was glad it was over, and I was glad that it ended like it did.
Somewhere in the range of 5 years into his prison sentence that he died. It was natural causes.
Miss Waits was a good lady. She did not deserve what happened to her. Anytime a community loses a person like that, the entire community suffers. I feel it's important for the world to know that there are people in the justice system that continue to fight. Some of the good guys really do have badges, and they really are working for the right causes.